Welcome to Follow This, a series where I do my best to highlight the great resources related to behavioral and mental health that are out there. Today, an interview with Abraham, co-founder of Why We Do What We Do, a podcast, and a colleague of mine also for the last 10 years in this field.
We try to keep them between 30 minutes to an hour for the most part, and they are discussions about, any topic that you can relate to psychology, albeit through a very, scientific lens. And so we try and use research and objective science, but unfortunately a lot of the times that we're tackling things, there isn't a lot of great research, and so we rely on essentially what we understand about human behavior. So we're just gonna run those topics, whatever they might be, through that filter because it's the most pragmatic, it's the most parsimonious, and it's the most scientific filter.
Who's the ideal listener?
When I originally thought of this, the ideal listener was anybody who was interested in psychology but wasn't a psychologist or even pursuing psychology. They liked to read about it. They're the kind of people who would stop in the grocery store and think about picking up that Psychology Today magazine, if that's even, I don't know if it's a magazine, but they would pick up that magazine because on the cover it said something like, how you know that you're an OCD personality or something like that. And I thought that's the kind of person I want to reach, is the people who are curious about this, but they don't have access to easy information about this. And I really got the idea when I was teaching Psych 101 and I was going through a Psych 101 textbook, and so many of the topics are things like, man, I need to just filter this through a really hardcore scientific lens for these students. So I think on one level I was really thinking about like undergrad psychology students, but I also didn't want it to be that narrow. And over time, I feel like I've wanted to broaden that audience even more.
What are your thoughts on overall pop psychology?
The problem with pop psychology is almost the fact that it's pop psychology at its foundation. It is a bite-sized piece of information to try and reach people in clickbait, in sound bites, and it relies still on the intuitiveness of answers to things, where if you can rationalize your way through an answer, if you can make it sound coherent, like it makes sense, then people will just buy it, and that's totally cool with them. They're like, oh yeah, the reason that you pick your nails is because you have a fetish about your fingers related to how you were raised by your mom who wasn't really there for you. And people are like, oh cool, I see that. And it's nonsense. You can literally say anything, and if you can connect the dots just right well enough, people will they don't know how to think about it in any other way other than this is what scientists say. And unfortunately, because they rely on unobservable variables, you can measure them any way you want, because you just say, this thing I'm going to measure, that represents this variable that exists hypothetically. And so whenever it shows up, that means that my variable is true. And then they do research, which produces they measure the variable that is a thing that they made up, and now everyone's like, look, science says it's true. And it's just one of the last frontiers where people still don't have a really great understanding of how to do science about it, or what the science would be if it were to be done. Because, like I said, anything can make sense. And when you're dealing with variables that are private, because they're thoughts and feelings and emotions, then anything goes if you can sound like it makes sense to at least some people.
Two questions. You ever afraid that Why We Do What We Do will slide into this pop psychology realm?
Kinda. I've gotten more comfortable, and I've been afraid of how comfortable I've gotten being able to say things like, this is what could be going on, and this is sort of makes sense to think about it like this. And so that would be my biggest fear. I don't think I'll ever I'm very confident that I'll never be okay with just explaining away variables with nonsense unobservable phenomenon and just saying that that's the cause, just this magical thing that happens. But I do want to be careful not to be too comfortable speculating without any kind of evidence.
The goal is not pop psychology and put something out there that's kind of functionally replacing it.
Yeah.
Is there biases there?
Well, I mean,
Listeners to beware?
there would be regardless of who we were. Everyone's going to have a bias. But yes, we all more or less come from a behavioral background. So we color it with the bias from that mindset. That being said, we've made a concerted effort to look at research from different areas. One of the cool things about doing this is that it's forced me to read research from occupational therapy, from neuropsych, from cognitive psych, from physical therapy, a whole wide range of these different fields, which has been really cool to get to dig into those. And so we're always, I think the most salient bias that we bring to this is the worldview that of determinism, that everything in the universe follows an essentially uniform set of laws, and that those laws don't just change capriciously, and that things work because they work that way, and they work that way consistently. And if you adopt that, then you can't have certain variables that are nonsense made up things that exist in an alternate reality that then cause behavior. So there is no mind-body separation problem, because the mind would have to exist in a different space of reality than the body does, and we don't believe that there is a second reality because that's not parsimonious. So the bias that we bring to any interpretation would naturally exclude any argument that would favor the idea of an alternate reality playing some kind of causal role in the things that we do. And so that is a pretty clear example of how that bias shakes out. But yes, that there are those versions of that that exist. And then I think for myself, I can't speak for everyone else because everyone's going to have sort of personal opinions about things. I come at the podcast from an opinion of being, or a value, I guess, of being humanistic. So I'm automatically going to view things less favorably that seem counterproductive to humanistic values. And there are people who would think that that's not even necessarily pragmatic. For example, if you see the sticker on some people's cars that say things like, if it absolutely has to be destroyed overnight, and that has a picture of like the military or the Marines, I think specifically. And my opinion is just like, I don't think that's an acceptable answer. I'm not gonna say we can just destroy lives because it absolutely has to happen. I just don't think it ever absolutely has to happen. And that's a bias I also bring to this. So I think, and I'm sure that shows up sometimes, and I think that people maybe pick up on that, but it's good to point it out. I think that's fair.
It's been almost 3 years. How much money's been made off the podcast?
We've made some money from our Patreon supporters, and then we got a $500 grant right when we started. So we have made maybe up to $1,000 total.
And spent?
Oh, several thousand, easily. Oh yeah, we're operating at a huge net loss.
So, I wanted to set that up for, why do you dedicate so much of your personal time?
Well, part of it's selfish. This is really fun for me. This is one of my absolute favorite hobbies that I do. I love learning, and I am committed to learning more. And I found after school, it got really easy to not learn things and just to do sort of easy, mindless, fun things. And I really like that this podcast forces me to learn a lot frequently. Another thing is, I'm one of those very rule followy type of people where I made a commitment to do this and I wanted to stick to that commitment. So there have been times where I've thought, if I just gave up on this, not that many people would care that it was gone. But I stuck through it anyway, and that's just sort of how I operate on things. And so I think it's fun. I really don't want to let the team of people down that have sacrifice so much of their time to work on it. I don't want to let down any listeners who might be getting value from it. And we get emails from people who have said very kind things about how much they get out of the podcast. So I mostly, like, as long as it's still a reinforcing fun thing for me to do, and people seem to be getting things out of it, I'll probably just keep doing it.
More questions.
Yeah.
Do you now go by Dr. Abraham?
For the purpose of the podcast, I have brought that up a few times. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congrats, by the way.
Thanks.
And what are you most excited about when it comes to why we do what we do in this new year?
Well, now that I'm out of school and Shane's out of school and you've been out of school, but now that we have so many people who aren't dedicated to being students full time and kind of have a little freedom and latitude with their time to an extent, so we've set forth a lot of goals that I think are more realistic than some of the goals we've set forward before. I'm excited to do another year of the podcast. By the end of this year, we should be really close to 200 episodes. I'm excited about that. I'm excited for a 3-year mark, and I think we've sort of put ourselves in a position to start collaborating a little more with other podcasts and potentially do a live show here and there. And so those are the things I'm pretty excited about for the most part. I think that this will actually maybe turn into a legitimate business that maybe can pay people for their time, which would be amazing.
You have one call to action, what would it be?
The thing that would help the most, honestly, is just people listening. Like, that's the thing that we need, is just, we know that there's an audience out there, and it's hard to gauge. The metrics that we have aren't super great right now, which I'm working on. But yeah, I would say, word of mouth is one of the best ways to spread this.
All right, so I have a quick confession for you all. This is a little bit of a self-promo piece, as I'm also a member of the team, but I still think it's really great content for anyone interested in behavioral insights, behavioral science, psychology, and understanding why we do what we do. And I might ask some...
I think that the goals that we've laid out... Oh, my mic just fell. Sorry. I can hear it in your ear from here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. It says screw my hair really badly. Okay. Damn it fell again. I think the sweat
You're good.
has altered the adhesiveness.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna rub it a little bit.
Okay.
Sorry.
What's too bad is I don't...
Okay. Now stick.
Find it on all available podcast platforms. It's linked down below, and consider supporting the team at the link below as well. Great content costs a lot of money, and helping out gives you access to other cool stuff, and there are partnership opportunities. That's your Daily BA.
Give me a talk real quick. But I can't help falling in love with Stu.
Hey, if you enjoyed this, you're going to enjoy the series that's over here. And if you have time, this is funded by patrons. Click the top link down below to learn more about how you can support the vision and what I'm trying to build here.